introduce Sean Martin here. He is from the Advanced Manufacturing Technology Department, and I, Ashley Jones, am from the Welding and Fabrication Department. Both fall within the Advanced Technology and Public Services division here at WCC. We kind of set this up a little bit different than the organization you guys had sent out in the template, because our path was a little bit different of finding this data and then utilizing the data.
Turn it on.
Good talk. All right.
There you go.
All right. So,
yeah. So the original goals, like, because coming into this, we kind of got this kind of rolled downhill till eventually ended up with us as instructors participating. So like not really knowing a whole lot of what we were going into, like the original goals for like art for my department coming in was primarily focusing on things like advisory council, helping promote and support that, because that was something we were in the process of trying to rebuild, as well as building stronger recruitment strategies. But of course, as we've gone through the data and started to understand more, stuff has changed.
and the same was almost exactly true for me as well. So I also kind of thought that we would be taking a better look at our advisory committee and how to better utilize them. And then also like, how would we actually gather good data from our graduates to better understand those student outcomes and the employment outcomes, or the employment opportunities that our students were actually getting access to.
So like here was the breakdown of like Washtenaw, Wayne County based on our demographic that we initially got from that Michigan Workforce Playbook, looking at some of the different, just the breakdown of ethnicities. But we kind of found there's some things that changed when we started to look more at specific data.
So when we look at more specific data, I was able to find some really good information from the National Equity Atlas. Here you can see we have the working age population, which they defined as 25 to 64. Okay, so when we narrow it down to that group, which we think is a better characterization of who would actually seek education with us. So when you take a look here, let's see if this actually works. There we go. All right, so the breakdown of our populations, you can see that a lot of what we have here, a lot of white folks, and then our minorities kind of less accumulative for our population there. But then when we start taking a look here at, no, my thing's not working. Sorry guys, my mouse is, but that's still on. Sorry.
There you go.
We're good at this, I promise. So when we start breaking down the population of who is actually accessing education here at WCC, we were able to get some of these numbers from some internal studies that WCC has actually done themselves. So taking a look here, we can see how the previous education breakdown of who we have coming in as new enrolled students in the 2020 school year. Okay, so these are only referring to newly enrolled students for our most recent year. Okay, so male, female breakdown here. And then what I really want to point out here is that when we actually take a look at the population of folks that enrolled as a new student here at WCC, we actually pretty accurately reflect the breakdown of population that we have here in that workforce age group. Okay, so you can see that about 15% of Black folks are sorry, about 15% of our new enrolled students are Black folks, and then we have a high range here of Asian and Hispanic, but white folks actually make up only 66% of our newly enrolled students. And if you were to go back and look at that graph, you would see that this percentage here is right in between, really, where that population is for Ann Arbor and that population is for Detroit. Okay, so this is really good, and this is actually lower than the population in Ann Arbor as far as it's reflected percentage wise.
So this was actually a breakdown of like where some of our new students were coming from, which we thought was interesting because when we were looking at some of the data, like knowing that like Livingston County to the north of us doesn't have a community college, and having come from teaching in at high school in Livingston County, I know a lot of my students that were graduating out of my mechatronics program were coming here to Washtenaw. And this gave us a breakdown of like some of the different counties and where some of our new students are coming from. And we found that like around 10% of our new students are actually coming from Livingston County, which of course has no community college. And we've noticed that around 42% of our new students are actually coming from outside of the service area that we thought initially of like Washtenaw and Wayne. And so like we currently have students in our program from as far away as like Jackson and Kalamazoo coming into our individual programs. So we're currently trying to get some more detail, like we've been meeting with some of our other deans and stuff to get kind of individual breakdowns within our programs as well to see how that reflects. And so we can better understand who we're servicing. And then this is basically a breakdown of the ALICE threshold that we found for within Washtenaw County. And we noticed that there's a large number of these households that are within Washtenaw County that were below that ALICE threshold.
So with that, Alice, I think we prefer that threshold or use that data more because it encompasses more information about where a household's money is going to go. But as you can see here, I was able to pull up some data for just the poverty level, right? And I really wanted to show you guys this because I thought it was interesting. So this is for Ann Arbor specifically. Where we are actually located. But if you take a look here, that poverty level is increased in a couple groups significantly, right? But it's still, we can see, even though white folks experienced an increase in that poverty level, it's still less than half of what other minorities might be experiencing in the Ann Arbor area. So this is quite the increase of 3% here. For people of color specifically. Now, when we look at Detroit too, I found this very interesting. I don't know that it's relevant, but it's very interesting that if you look at Detroit's population, for white folks, yes, poverty level did tick up a tiny bit, but it actually decreased for other minorities in those communities. So I just thought that was a very interesting point. When we talk about who's actually coming into our schools, right? Where they're at economically speaking when they enroll. So now this is more information directly from Washtenaw internally. So we have about 18,500 students enrolled for that 2021 year, right? But with that, so out of 18,500 people, only 6,000 of them are accessing financial aid. So we have only about a third of new students accessing some form of financial aid. But when we compare that to the ALICE data, we would expect to see this number much higher because we're seeing 60%, 48% of households within those specific communities within Washtenaw County are lower than that ALICE threshold, right? The assumption could be made that these folks below the ALICE threshold are experiencing barriers to enrolling at WCC, or those same folks are experiencing barriers to accessing financial aid that is available here at WCC. It's something that we have to do a lot more digging to really understand why that might be, why that disparity exists.
And then like a couple other just interesting things we found, we were going through the WCC internal data that we found for new enrollments and just enrollment statuses, is that we actually have around 3,000 students that are first generation college students, which we thought was just something that was interesting. As well as like, I personally was a little surprised when I saw the sheer percentage of our students who are actually part-time students as opposed to full-time. And like, to a point, it made sense to me in like our programs because a lot of our students in our programs are working full-time jobs and coming back for retraining. But it was just something that was kind of surprising seeing how much of the college is actually part-time versus full-time students. And then that kind of takes us into some of the like prospects of our programs. So one of the things we kind of found that was a disparity when we were looking at the data was that we found that like welding and robotics and mechatronics gets kind of clumped into these very generalized categories of jobs that include some very low skill jobs like your production associates that really skew some of those averages. So like we just wanted to like, these are some of the different jobs that we're actually targeting with our programs that we were able to find through WCC's career coach data website that was available for students. And that this also gives a perspective of job openings in Michigan as well for these different positions.
And as you can see, all of these jobs here that we are presenting, all of them would meet that survival and a stability income for folks in our area. So what were the key takeaways that we got from all of this? Number one, we realized that minority students are underrepresented within our division, but not within WCC as a whole. So we are targeting these folks out there, but our division doesn't seem to be doing well at that, okay? WCC uses marketing to appeal to non-traditional students for the ATP programs or CTE programs, right? But it has gaps in the direct recruiting of those students. So when you take a look at some of the photographs and such and the locations that our marketing department is using and applying, you would assume that it really is encompassing these non-traditional or underserved populations, right? But when you take a look at our labs and our classrooms as in general, you can visually definitely see that there is a disparity there and we're underserving certain communities, right? But this is something that we need to dig a little bit deeper in because we don't have that information available just yet at that deep dive level for departments. The poverty level for people of color is twice that of white households in our two closest service areas, according to the National Equity Atlas. So this is another reason why I really believe that we need to target those populations a little bit more directly or more effectively. And then lastly here, almost 16% of our newly enrolled students this past year were first generation college students. So that tells us that we have a huge population of folks here that really need help with the ins and outs or understanding of the ins and outs of attending college, right? Understanding the different languages that we use at this level of education versus what they may be used to at home. All of the things, the processes that they have to go through to access financial aid and register and understand what classes they should be taking. So this is definitely a point that we should be paying attention to. All right, so our new goals now that we have changed based on this process and all of the information that we were digging through. I've condensed this now to encompass, these are the goals for both of us now, because we realize that our departments are very similar in all of these aspects. So making DEI a priority within our departments is clearly something that we should work on. Build better awareness for retention and wraparound services for those underrepresented populations and for those new first-time or first-generation college students. And then also develop partnerships with our recruiting teams within WCC to help them better understand our programs and the employment opportunities within the manufacturing industries. Because I think, like Sean was saying, we see a big disconnect between what they understand as industrial work or industrial opportunity, employment opportunities, and the employers that are actually reaching out directly to our departments to recruit students or graduates from our programs.
So some of like the next steps that we're looking at taking right now and are in the process of taking are like, we're trying to meet with some of like our recruiting teams so we can start devising strategies that can include instructors in recruiting. So for example, coming out of the high school program teaching mechatronics, I found that when colleges came to me to recruit my students and present to my students, the recruiters, that the students just weren't engaged. And they just like, frankly, a lot of times the recruiters couldn't answer their more program specific questions. So, but when we would have colleges that would come and like an instructor, someone would come with them that knew the program or came out of the program area, the students were considerably more engaged and were more excited about the prospects of going to that college, that university, that training center, whatever it was. So another thing we're trying to look at is also creating a retention plan for those underrepresented and non-trad students that are within our division, and then teasing out more specific data on individual programs and demographics and those completion rates within those different groups. So like right now, we had met with our Dean of Equity and Inclusion. He's currently working on trying to put together reports to find out, to take a lot of this data that we've been looking at and get it specific for our different departments and programs so that we can better identify how our programs differ from the university as a whole and then our county as a whole as well. And then we're also currently in the process of meeting with our workforce and community development centers so we can better serve those industry partners and help develop better employment opportunities for our students.